Welcome back to another video covering UFC 299 O'Malley versus Vera 2 going on this weekend in Miami, Florida. Today, we're going to be taking a detailed look at the main card, going over every matchup on it, talking about how I think that those fights are going to go, breaking down some of the stylistic matchups that we're looking at, some of the things that the guys are bringing into these fights in terms of their last results and the stakes that these matchups bring for them, what technical details to look out for during the fight, and as a culmination of all those factors, making a detailed prediction for how each of these fights will end. I'm not going to go over a betting breakdown of the card yet until we have some better lines later in the week, probably Thursday or Friday. But for today, we're just going to focus in on those 5 fights starting off the main card with Petr Yan and Song Yadong in your 135-pound division. So, quick look at the tail of the tape. Not much difference in height and reach. 5 years is the difference in age. Petr Yan switches stances. Song Yadong prefers orthodox. 16-5 is Petr Yan's record. Interesting to note that one of those losses is outside the UFC, and the other 4 are in his last 5 fights. Whereas Song Yadong, 21-7-1. And then we have a breakdown too here of where exactly these wins and losses are coming from. So by decision, Petr Yan is going to boast an 8-4 record, whereas Song Yadong is 9-4. Then Petr Yan is undefeated by finish, 1 submission win and 7 knockouts, whereas Song Yadong is 3-0 by submission, with 9-2 being his record by knockout. And in their last 5, you couldn't get more opposite unless they were undefeated and winless. We have a 4-1 fighter in Song Yadong taking on the 1-4 no mercy Petr Yan. Taking a look at notable wins, you could definitely pick more for Petr Yan here. I thought about perhaps including his win over Uriah Faber as a notable one, but that Uriah wasn't at the peak of his powers. So I think Aldo and Sandhagen are most likely his strongest wins to date. Whereas on the other side, you're likely to pick Maurice and Ricky Simone as the biggest wins that Song Yadong has picked up to date. When you look at the odds, it's virtually a pick'em here on this fight. So this is a really interesting matchup, and if you watch my video talking about momentum, a big part of that is because while Petr Yan has been a staple at the top this bantamweight division, and he was at one point undefeated in the UFC, he is, in his last 5 fights, been on a bit of a downward spiral, and it started with that horrific illegal knee that got him disqualified and his belt taken from him against Aljamain Sterling. And then he picked up his only win in his last 5 in a competitive fight with Corey Sandhagen that he clearly got the win in. Notable as well that while MMA math doesn't work at all, Song Yadong does have a loss to Corey Sandhagen, so that's one of the common opponents that they have there. Then you also see 2 split decision losses for Petr Yan back-to-back coming in his rematch with Aljamain Sterling, which many people feel that he won, and in his fight with current bantamweight champion Suga O'Malley, which again, many people think that he won that fight. And then he got dominated 50-45 by Merab Dvalishvili last year, and that was his last performance. So coming into this fight, you definitely wouldn't see Song Yadong and Petr Yan being pick'em odds if this fight was made in 2020 or 2021. It just wouldn't be the case. Petr Yan would be a massive favorite, but now, not so much. And to be honest with you, I think that this line probably reflects where the truth is of this matchup. And I think that we might have just been overrating Petr Yan because he does have some stylistic weaknesses that a lot of guys are able to find the holes in and exploit with their game. Now, obviously, Merab was able to just completely overwhelm the sensors of Petr Yan, make him unable to download any data, and not make any reads over the course of their fight by just outpacing him, by doing what Merab does, not giving him any space to get anything done. And I don't see Song Yadong doing that necessarily, but we even saw Aljo execute a weaker version of that game plan against Petr Yan in his own way in their second fight, to success still, having picked up that win. Now, what I think that those reveal, those losses along the trek, more than anything show, is that there are inherent weaknesses to the high and tight boxing guard that Petr Yan approaches every fight with, because it's so inherent to his style, And there are weaknesses to being such a slow starter. He needs so much time to make his reads that it's pretty much a guarantee, even before he was on this win streak, that at the very least, if he wasn't losing round one, it was pretty competitive and you could give it to the other guy. Even in fights where Petr Yan ended up brutally finishing the opponent, he still wasn't able to capitalize early and win early rounds. He needs to have a slow pace to be able to get that information. And if you're Song Yadong, coming off of 3 main events in a row where the only loss you took was because the doctor said you couldn't continue off of a cut from Corey Sandhagen elbows. The other ones, you go almost the full distance with Ricky Simone, still have enough energy in the tank by round 5 to not really be slowing down at all, and be able to spark him out cold that round 2. And then you go all the way to decision against Chris Gutierrez, another 5-round fight. This fight's not 5 rounds. This is a 3-round fight, and you're going against someone who is a slow starter. Song Yadong is not going to be engaging in any sort of feeling out process with Petr Yan in this fight. He's going to be looking to crowd him early. He's going to be looking to blitz in and get inside the pocket with Petr Yan. He's going to want Petr Yan to see his hand speed. If he wants to have a boxing match, Song Yadong is happy to have a boxing match, and I think he wants him to feel his power early before he's had a chance to really settle in the fight and start making reads. Because if Song Yadong is getting into the pocket, he's throwing those fast hands, they're connecting to the head and to the body. You've got to think about that, and now he's changing levels. You're on your back, and now you have to think about how that's going to go. This could become a very unmanageable fight super quickly for Petr Yan. And to be candid with you, that's what I predict happening, which is why I predict Song Yadong to win by 29-28 unanimous decision. And I don't have it written here, but even though Petr Yan's never been finished in his professional career, he did get knocked out once in the amateurs, and Song Yadong can thump. If there's anybody up here who can knock out Petr Yan in this bantamweight division not named Sean O'Malley, and remember, Sean O'Malley hurt him in that fight too, then it's Song Yadong. So if you want to take a flyer and you can get a good line on Song Yadong by KO, I would advise that. But my official prediction is that he will get it done. He will have a competitive second round with Petr Yan after coming out and winning the first round super clearly. And then he's going to be the stronger closer too. He might finish this fight on the ground. I'm not saying he's going to get a finish on the ground. I don't think he's going to submit Petr Yan, but he might end this fight if it goes to decision, riding out the rest of round 3, getting some ground and pound, and just securing that win. Because I think one other thing to talk about too is that Song Yadong's hungry. He is on a run right now trying to get to this title shot. And with Suga Sean O'Malley at the top of the division now, that's a way more appetizing matchup for a lot of fighters than Aljamain Sterling was. They think they have a better chance against Suga. And I think that that's going to be extra motivating for Song Yadong, whereas Petr knows that he's on such a bad loss streak and that a win here is really good and important in getting him back on this stretch. It's almost a must-win fight for him with how bad this stretch has been. But he's already been an undisputed UFC champion before. Sure, he never got to defend that belt, but it's not the same kind of hunger that you'll see out of someone who there's never been a male UFC champion from his country before. It's just, you're talking about different levels, and I think that the hunger Song Yadong brings into this matchup is going to be palpable come Saturday night. But next, we are going up to 170 pounds for a matchup in your welterweight division between Gilbert Burns and the surging Jack Della Maddalena. So, tail of the tape here, height and reach similar. Most significant standout is that 2-inch reach advantage for Jack Della Maddalena. Biggest age discrepancy on the card, 10 years is the difference here. You're going to see a lot of orthodox versus switch matchups on this main card too, so we'll kind of talk about the implications of that for Jack Della Maddalena's boxing. Record here, 22-6 for Gilbert Burns, 16-2 for Jack Della, 7-4 is Burns by decision, 6-2 by KO, 9-0 by sub on the other side, 3-0 for Jack Della Maddalena, 11-1 by KO, 2-1 by sub. In their last 5, Dorino boasting 3-2. Those 2 losses coming by short notice, 50-45 to Bilal last year. which he was injured excruciatingly in round 1. And then 5-0, the other loss was Khamzat Chimaev in a Fight of the Year winner for 2022. Jack Della Maddalena 5-0, undefeated in the UFC. Those 2 losses coming before he made it here. Best wins for Gilbert Burns on the trek has got to go to his win against Jorge Masvidal. Not necessarily in terms of how difficult it was, but stylistically, you got to think that Jack Della and Jorge share some similarities. And then Neil Magny, a great win as well. He was able to get that one done with his grappling, so that could figure to factor in here. Whereas you'll take the Randy Brown win and the Kevin Holland as Jack Della Maddalena's best ones. Side note, guys, if you're ever getting into a fight with someone on the street and his nose looks like this and his ears look like this, you should just give him your wallet and try and create as much distance as possible. You're going to get your ass kicked. So the odds here have Jack Della Maddalena pretty solidly the favorite for this main card. At least there's a lot of really close fights on here. And this one's interesting because I could really see this fight going one of 2 ways. I could see Gilbert Burns' grappling being the story of this fight. I could see Jack Della Maddalena sitting down on a bunch of guillotines for no reason that he's never actually going to secure against a BJJ black belt the caliber of Durinho, and him getting dominated on the ground. Not in the sense of, like, if you watched Umar Nurmagomedov's fight this weekend, where he dominated his opponent on the ground. He was landing ground and pound. He would threaten submissions if he was in the position to do that. More so like how he dominated Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, where there was like a total 40 strikes thrown throughout the fight. 1 takedown each round, just kind of sitting there and holding him in half guard, Jailton Almeida style, until the bell rings. That could definitely happen, because JDM showed in that controversial split decision that he picked up along the trek last year. What was that guy's name that he was fighting? It was Basil Hafez, that split decision that he picked up, that sometimes his takedown defense isn't so competent, and you'll see a lot of strikers not be as urgent as they need to about takedown defense because they feel comfortable sitting for a guillotine. Dustin Poirier will do it all the time and just like straight up lose rounds for it, and it's not a good look, especially against somebody whose BJJ is the caliber of Gilbert Burns. Because what a lot of people don't understand is that having BJJ the level of Burns will get you a dangerous submission game, and he showed that as well. But it'll also just make your understanding of transitions and control on the ground so much better at that black belt level, where you can see, like, the reason Pantoja was able to dominate Royval on the ground isn't because of his wrestling. His wrestling's fine, but his BJJ is why he was able to understand those positions, the different kinds of reversals and sweeps that Royval was attempting on him, and navigate all of them so effectively to make that fight just incredibly boring. So that is one thing that could happen. That's how I would see Durinho getting it done, because if this is a decision, you can see Jack Della is a lot more efficient in getting those decisions to convert. Obviously, smaller sample size, but Durinho has been on the receiving end of some close decision losses. Think back to that Khamzat Chimaev one, where he could have gotten it done, but in a similar way to what we'll talk about with Kevin Holland, not nearly as bad. It's kind of something that was talked about with regards to Paulo Costa as well back at UFC 298. Sometimes these fighters who lose close decisions a lot feel like they're winning fights and don't handle exchanges on the feet or in the grappling how they need to in order to win a round, because they feel like they are, and they don't push it that extra step. And I don't know that that's what Burns, I would classify him as being historically, but I feel like he got caught in a scrap with Khamzat Chimaev that he could have won, but he was just too into making it entertaining and didn't capitalize on where he could have actually won that fight. Now, if Jack Della Maddalena wins this fight, I could see him really utilizing the weakness that Durinho has shown to handling straight punches, to light him up on the feet, to really keep him at the end of that reach, to not let him get in on a takedown, and to goad him into fighting in the pocket, to having a brawl with him and trying to knock him out too, because that's going to be where Jack Della Maddalena will have his most success. He can switch stances, and he can attack the left side of Dorino to the body as well. And then essentially, really, the boxing versus the grappling is the decision maker here, because if Della Maddalena can set the terms for engagement and get Gilbert to be in a boxing match with him, Gilbert's kicking game isn't to the caliber that it's going to pose significant challenges to Jack Della Maddalena, where he is going to need to be super nervous about being in kickboxing range and make sure that it's in boxing range, so he can really keep the distance as far out as he wants to and set the terms of engagement, force Gilbert to follow him, and then circle off if he ever gets his back to the cage. And it's for all of those reasons that at the end of the day, while again, like I said, I feel like there's kind of two distinctive ways this fight could go, I am backing Jack Della Maddalena to win by either 29-28 unanimous decision or a second round KO. And if he KOs him, I see it being kind of out of nowhere. I see it being in the middle of an exchange while the fight has been going on for a bit. Obviously, it's been round 2. I see there being a competitive round 1 where you probably score it for Jack Della Maddalena on damage, but it's pretty close on the feet. Burns ends up securing a takedown, and then you kind of have to consider the damage for Jack Della versus the damage and control of Burns. But then in round 2, while they're in the middle of an exchange, Burns gets lazy with his boxing, and he throws something that is easily parried by Jack Della Maddalena with his right hand, and then he just catches a clean left hook on the chin, and he gets wobbled, and Jack Della Maddalena finishes him off against the side of the cage, follows him there, and gets it done. But I would predict 29-28 unanimous decision. The more I think about it, I feel like a KO is going to happen, like, more and more. But I think that I might just be getting excited about this card, because that's kind of the vibe that I've gotten on a lot of these fights. The more I think about them is that there might be a finish. So we'll see. This fight should be a banger. I don't think enough people are talking about how fun that one's going to be. So moving on to the featured fight of the card, we have Kevin Holland facing on the debuting Michael Venom Page. Quick run through the tail of the tape for this 185-pound bout. Michael Venom Page lies about his height, has 6'3" on the UFC website and 6'2" on something else. Let's just be honest about our height. You're not more of a man for being 6'3" versus 6'2". Yeah, just keep that in mind. 2-inch difference favors Holland in reach. 5 years is the age difference. Michael Venom Page being the senior. Once again, told you, another Orthodox versus Switch matchup here. I think I said there was a lot. There might only be 2, and I just, lied. But definitely interesting. Then 25-10 with 1 no contest is facing 21-2. 4-6 for Holland decision. Pretty ugly decision record there, going up against 5-1 for MVP. 14-1 by KO versus 13-1. 7-3 by sub to 3-0. And on their last 5, 2-3 for Holland versus 4-1. Holland's got some notable wins. I picked Buckley and Chiesa. You pick out some other ones, but I think that those are probably the best. And I was tempted to say nobody for MVP because that's the answer, but he is 1-1 with Douglas Lima. So if you know who Douglas Lima is, then he's 1-1 with him. But if you don't know who Douglas Lima is exactly, and then the betting odds for this one, again, virtually a pick'em here. You have -135, the favorite technically for Kevin Holland, and +114 for MVP. I'm going to be honest, I don't really want to talk about this fight that much, and the main reason I don't want to talk about this fight that much is because whenever MVP faces someone who's of similar skill to him, he's not just fighting some absolute can that he can do whatever he wants to, just Fortnite dance in the middle of the octagon and then KO him. The fights can get really boring, they can get really feely-outy, and he can end up not utilizing a lot of his game, which is kind of the same story about Kevin Holland. Not about him facing similar competition, but just this, man, as a UFC fan, I don't watch to see people get knocked out or to see them get submitted. I see I want to see great fighters do great things. So I just want everybody to be fighting to their full potential. Like, love him or hate him, I want Colby Covington to go in there and be a cardio machine against Leon Edwards at UFC 296, not whatever he did, you know? So it's going to be frustrating, even if I hate a guy, for him to not be doing stuff when I know he can do it. Enter Kevin Holland, the king of being frustrating if you enjoy fighters who are good, because Kevin Holland is super talented. He's super talented on the feet. He's got knockout power. He's got really good kicks. He's got nice boxing. He's super good on the ground, too. But he just doesn't give a fuck. Like, it's super confusing, and I don't understand why this is what we're doing at this point. Because, I mean, look at that fight with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He had such a confusing approach to that fight, where if you're going to say, hey, I don't want to take down Wonderboy, I just want to stand and bang with him, that's fine, I guess, right? If you want to do that and make it exciting for the fans, that's okay, right? But at that point, you're sacrificing your career and, like, the opportunity of winning that fight, because you're not going to beat Wonderboy on the feet, to be entertaining. And if that's the decision you want to make, that's fine. But at a certain point in that fight, I think around, like, round 3, maybe partway through round 4, before the end of it, when it got stopped, he decided to start taking him down and actually utilizing ground control. So, what is it? Do you want to win the fight? And if so, why aren't we grappling Wonderboy from the offset, or at least working in a takedown or two into the stand-up? Because he was competitive-ish in the stand-up for the first couple of rounds, and if you put in the grappling, there's a chance that he could actually have been beating Wonderboy on the feet because of the threat of the takedown, because he's a skilled enough fighter to do it, but he chooses not to. So, that's awesome. And really, with this matchup, I see it going one of two ways. One thing I want to know, I know a lot of people are picking MVP to win this by knockout. I'm not familiar with Kevin Holland's amateur record to the extent that one exists, but that only KO loss that he has is not a KO. It is his hand being broken and him not being able to fight after round 4 of his fight against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy was not able to put him out. Who else has Kevin Holland fought that has not been able to put him out? Let's go through the list. Jack Della Maddalena was not able to put him out. Santiago Ponzinibbio failed to. Hamzat Chimaev failed to, although they were grappling like pretty much that whole fight. Damn, he's fought a bunch of bums. He beat Anthony Hernandez. Wow, that win is aged great. So I guess he hasn't fought anybody with crazy knockout power. He did fight a middleweight Thiago Santos for whatever that's worth. But he could get knocked out by MVP. If there's anybody in the welterweight division he hasn't fought who will knock him out, it's probably going to be a guy like Shavkat or MVP. But I just don't see it as overwhelmingly likely. I think Holland is responsible enough defensively that that's not going to happen. But I also am not super confident in him winning this fight either. I don't know if he's going to take down MVP. I know he should take down MVP, but I don't think he will. So, like I said, I don't really want to waste that much more time on this fight, because it's really a fight where either guy could just come in here and lay a huge egg or steal the night with an incredible performance. I am backing Kevin Holland to win by submission or get a 29-28 split decision. If you can get a good line on split decision, I know it's like a risky flyer to take, but I kind of feel the vibe on this one, you know what I mean? I feel a split decision-y vibe, so if you can get a good line on that, don't sleep on split decision in this fight, okay? We're going to lightweight, the best division in the UFC for this co-main event. So excited for this one. Dustin Poirier taking on the surging Benoit Saint Denis here. Very similar in height and reach here. Not much worth discussing. Second biggest discrepancy in age here, 7 years. The difference between the 35-year-old Poirier and the 28-year-old Benoit. Both southpaws. Interesting to note because Poirier just got finished by head kick. It was a right head kick from Justin Gaethje, if my memory serves correctly, but because we're in a southpaw versus southpaw matchup, the open side here is going to be that left side of Poirier, which means that the left side high kick and the left side body kick as well. The left side high kick being the one that Benoit just used to finish Matt Frevola at UFC 295, Madison Square Garden, is open, like I said. So it's not the head kick that Dustin just got finished with, but it's something to keep an eye out for when you've got that southpaw versus southpaw, because the defense is not going to be as strong on that left-hand side. Obviously, the right kick for Benoit, but you know what I meant. So yeah, it would have been the kick that DP got finished by. I had it mixed up for a second. Regardless, though, moving on to their record, 29-8 for Dustin Poirier with 1 no contest, facing 13-1 with 1 no contest for Benoit. 7-2 is facing 0-1, the worst decision record technically here by percentage, but I think Kevin Holland's is a little shittier, for being honest with ourselves. 14-3 for Dustin Poirier, the former lightweight knockout king. Shouts out the GOAT, Drew Dober. 4-0 Benoit is by knockout. 8-3 for sub by Dustin Poirier. 9-0 is Benoit. On their last 5, Charles and Justin Gaethje have picked up wins over Dustin Poirier, making him 3-2, whereas Benoit's only UFC loss falls just outside of his last 5, being 6 matches ago, making him 5-0 here. Notable wins, a lot better for Poirier. There's a laundry list, really. You could go down the list, but I'm just going to put Holloway and McGregor on the list here. If you don't know Dustin Poirier's signature wins, though, you have some fights to go watch after this video, because every fight he's in is a highlight. And then the notable wins for Benoit is going to be Moises and Frevola. So the odds here, this is crazy. -205 for Benoit Saint-Denis, who's ranked number 11, 12, or 13 in the lightweight division, versus the number 3 ranked Dustin Poirier at +170. Disrespectful to DP. I'm just going to put that out there right off the top. And I think that a lot of the discourse here has been disrespectful to DP, so there's going to be the Benoit Glazers for sure. They always show up no matter where. But the fact of the matter is that Benoit hasn't fought the caliber opponents that Dustin Poirier has. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that he's going to lose this fight right off the bat, right? Charles Oliveira had been fighting much higher caliber opponents than Islam Makhachev had prior to their bout against each other, and we still all know how that one went. But what it does mean is that Benoit isn't going to be afforded the same freedoms that he had fighting Matt Frevola, right? You can't make as many mistakes fighting Dustin Poirier, because a mistake that might seem inconsequential, overexerting yourself a little bit in round 1 to get that takedown, trying to pursue that finish when that guy gets hurt, are not tiny mistakes against Dustin Poirier. They are huge mistakes. Look at that first fight that Dustin Poirier had with Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje nearly had Dustin out of there several times, but because at that point in time, his style was too geared towards the finish, too geared towards being exciting, he gassed himself out. He wasn't able to stay in deep waters with Poirier down the stretch. He made those little mistakes. That's all you need to do. You could argue the exact same thing with Dan Hooker in their fight. Let himself get worn out too early. Wasn't able to stand the stretch, as Poirier was the much fresher fighter late. And I think that this is really important to talk about, because while you might think that the grappling of Benoit could play a big factor here, with some of the most challenging fights Poirier's had in his career, for example, Charles and Khabib being against grapplers, Charles never got him down. He went 0 for 6 on takedowns. And Benoit ain't fucking Khabib, dude. He's just not. Dustin talked about how he was scared afterwards, had nightmares about Khabib getting his hands on him and taking him down. I'm sorry, nobody's talking about Benoit Saint-Denis like that. And it's going to be a while before they do, because Khabib's kind of one of a kind in that respect. So I don't see the grappling having that kind of effect. Will Benoit get him down? Yes, because Poirier likes sitting on guillotines. But I don't see him controlling him. I can see him landing some ground and pound, but it's not going to be fight-threatening, I don't think, most of the time. And if it ever is significant ground and pound, that'll create opportunities for somebody with grappling the level of Poirier to initiate a scramble that he can get enough out of to get back to his feet, get to the cage, maybe be able to build himself back up. One thing that I do want to note, though, is that while the grappling might not be as easy for Benoit as it has been, one thing that will also not be as easy is getting that knockout shot. How did he knock out Matt Frevola? Does everyone remember that one? Because I remember it vividly. I remember them getting up, and I always, every time that we're breaking from a clinch, if I see two fighters breaking, you gotta think, what strikes can be thrown right here? Are they close? Can he throw an elbow? Did he break and then create a lot of distance? Is there room for a kick? Something like that. I saw Frevola break off from that clinch and start, no joke, running, hands at his hips, just both hands down, hanging loose at his sides, out of the pocket, towards that left high kick. Like, you're gonna get KO. If the guy sees that and he can throw a kick there, he's throwing the kick. I'm not good at MMA, but I could tell that he was gonna throw a kick because it was so easy for him. And he didn't even have to throw a kick. He could have tried to get in closer before Frevola got out of the pocket and tried to intercept him with like a left hook or something like that. But the kick was there. He was in kick range. He threw up the kick. I don't see Poirier sprinting out of the pocket with his hands at his hips. Call me crazy, but even when Justin Gaethje, Leon Edwards to him, he still got a hand up for that kick somehow when he didn't even see it. It was just instinct that he got that hand up. Sure, KO'd him anyways, but at least he was defending it, right? I don't see it being as easy to knock out Dustin Poirier as a lot of people think that it will be for BSD. I don't see an easy route for BSD to win this by his grappling. And I think BSD's not got the better hands here either. I think that Poirier's boxing is way better, and I think that Benoit Saint Denis's boxing defense is a huge red exclamation point, question mark, whatever you want to call it. I think Poirier could absolutely light him up against the fence, especially if Benoit either thinks he can finish Poirier early or goes for the finish early and gasses out to any extent against Poirier. I think he's going to be smelling the blood in the water is the diamond and being able to finish that fight later on. One thing to note, too, the last thing I'll say about this fight before wrapping up, is that Dustin Poirier has never lost 2 fights in a row in his entire career. And this Saturday, that's not changing. So bsd-riders, stay fucking mad. Dustin Poirier to win by 49-46 unanimous decision, or round 2, 3, or 4 KO. I can't really cope and go all the way up to 4, so I'm going to say 2, 3, and I'm leaning 3 on this. Dustin Poirier going to get the job done, going to starch Benoit Saint Denis in Miami, Florida to set us up for the main event. Suga Sean O'Malley defending his bantamweight title for the first time against his only career loss in Marlon Chito Vera. Let's talk about it. 5'11", biggest height difference on the card favors Sean O'Malley here. 2 inches is the difference in reach, as is the difference in age, but favoring O'Malley and Chito respectively. Both of these guys like to switch stance. You won't see either of them fighting out of either stance for long in this fight. I don't think it's going to be lots of switches to capitalize on openings. You're probably going to see a lot of stance switches off of the front kicks from O'Malley to kind of get that lateral movement going. And you're going to see Chito just trying to set up that KO shot and losing the fight every second until he gets it. 17-1 with 1 no contest is the record for your bantamweight champion, and the challenger 23-8-1 on the trek. 4-0 by decision is O'Malley. A lot uglier is the record by decision for Marlon Chito Vera at 5-8. 12-1 stands your champion. 8-0 for Chito Vera. 1-0 by sub to 10-0. Marlon Chito Vera has never been finished. 4-0 with 1 no contest in his last 5 for Suga Sean. 4-1 for Chito Vera. That 1 loss coming by 50-45, pretty much a unanimous decision loss to Corey Sandhagen. Notable wins on the trek. Sean O'Malley has picked up wins over Sterling and Jan in his last 2, the best of his career by far. And you gotta give Cruz and O'Malley the best wins for Chito Vera. Highlight real knockout over the former bantamweight champion and another knockout over the current bantamweight champion. The odds stand at minus 258 for Suga, even though he lost that last fight, and plus 210 for your challenger. This fight is going to be crazy, and it could go a number of ways too. I want to talk about grappling first and foremost, just because I think it will end up being a footnote in this fight, but if it doesn't, I wouldn't be surprised either. I don't see Chito offensively grappling in this fight, even though there's an argument that in terms of the submission game, he does have an advantage over Sean O'Malley. But I think that the grappling capabilities of Sean O'Malley are underestimated. I think defensively he's a better grappler than many realize. I think that he could even offensively employ his grappling to keep Chito thinking on the feet and help him to inject a little bit more feedback and static into the reads that Chito is going to have to be making this entire fight. One thing to note, though, is that sloppy level changes from someone who isn't as accustomed to grappling could set up a knockout a la Frankie Edgar for Chito. But grappling isn't why we're coming to this fight. We're here to talk about the striking, and the striking in this fight is going to be so interesting. I feel like most of my analysis is going to be centered around Sean. And the main reason for that is because with Chito, the main thing that I have to say about him is a double-edged sword that defines his career, and it's that in the striking, he is really comfortable losing until he doesn't. And that can be really great, or it can suck like super bad, and it just kind of depends on the matchup. If you are going against someone like Merab, and you have Chito's style, for example, you might want to give up the first round in a 3-round contest, or the first couple of rounds in a 5-rounder, to get some reads on Merab, and then be able to knock him out or start landing extremely damaging shots as the fight goes on. But someone like Merab, like we talked about when we were breaking down that Peter Yang Song Yadong matchup, he's not going to give you the time to make those reads or the space to make those reads. So you're going to end up getting smothered, and before you know it, you're 25 minutes later, you lost the entire fight because you started late and you never managed to build your way back into it. Enter Corey Sandhagen against Chito Vera last year, handing him that loss, making it to where a lot of people don't even believe that he should be fighting for the belt right now, because frankly, Merab is the number one contender, and even if he isn't, Corey Sandhagen is right behind Merab, and he has a much more valid case to the title than Chito because he has a win over them. The reason Chito is here is because he's knocked out Suga Sean O'Malley. And the reason that he's knocked out Suga Sean O'Malley is arguably the reason he's knocked out a lot of guys, and it's because he's more durable than them. He can afford to fight the way that he does because none of the stuff that they land makes him really worried about losing the fight by knockout. He's durable enough on the ground and has a competent enough submission game that he's more of a threat than his opponents tend to be against him. And then he's able to make his reads, find the shot, set him up, and then land that KO blow. It was a head kick against Dominic Cruz. It was those vertical attacks against Frankie Edgar whenever he was level changing that ended up setting him up for the knockout as well. And ultimately, what Chito Vera can do to Sean O'Malley is the same thing that he did to him the first time, and that's outlasting him. Because Sean O'Malley has had a reputation for not being the most durable fighter. He sustained a really strange nerve injury in that Chito Vera fight that ended up with him stumbling all over the octagon on his back and getting flash KO'd by ground and pound elbows. And he's suffered other injuries as well that have delayed him being able to take fights. And going into his last fight with Aljamain Sterling, for example, we didn't learn until afterwards, but he actually had a rib injury and wasn't able to grapple for almost the entirety of his camp there. There's no telling what kind of injuries Suga could bring into this fight. There's no telling what kind of injuries he could pick up during the fight. There's no telling what the complexion could change because of that. Obviously, the same goes for Chito, but over the test of time, he's proven to be a much more durable fighter, and he's never been finished. Those are all things that are interesting for Chito Vera, but I think that the problems Suga poses to him stylistically are plentiful. First and foremost, while Suga's not known for high output, he's certainly capable of it. He showed you that in sections of that Petr Yan fight and was able to win that split decision off of his output in close rounds as well, being able to land damaging strikes as well as a large variety of them. And something like that could seriously pose problems to Chito, who is going to be working against not only someone who has the cardio and ability to move around the octagon, to keep him working constantly the entire fight, always moving, always trying to get at that target, while also being able to match him in terms of damage, because Chito oftentimes has such a damage advantage in his fights that, take for example his matchup with Rob Font. Rob Font outstruck him massively in that fight, but it only took a couple of strikes for Chito to win a round, because for everything that Rob Font was able to land, Chito lands 2 strikes and Rob Font's on his ass. So that'll change the complexion of a round entirely right there. But Suga has that power too. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people are forgetting as we look at this matchup, is that if there is anybody in this division who has the power to discipline Marlon Vera, his name is Sugar Sean O'Malley. And I think that that's what you're going to see on Saturday night. I think you're going to see a first round that is pretty boring, not dissimilar to round 1 between Suga and Aljo, where you're getting a lot of feeling out done on the feet. And then round 2, I think you're going to see Sean really getting to touch and go on Chito Vera. I think you're going to see him teeping him to the body and then getting off to an angle. I think you're going to see him really moving that lateral movement system to the capacity he needs to stay on the outside with Chito Vera, not let Chito get in on the inside, and not let Chito Vera score early damaging strikes. I think you're going to see him handling the leg kicks early too, in terms of checking them, moving out of the way of them, feinting to get Chito to throw those too early so that he can have timing reads on them as well early. And ultimately, I think that in round 3 or 4, your bantamweight champion will shock the world when he gets it done by round 3 or 4 knockout over Chito Vera, giving him his first loss by KO. Now, hear me out here. A lot of other people are picking Suga by KO too. But one thing I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, who has Marlon Vera fought that's going to knock him out? Who is it? So, let's see. John Lineker can thump. That was all the way back in 2017. And he didn't get knocked out, but he did lose. But I wouldn't see him getting knocked out by Lineker. He fought Song Yadong, get knocked out by him. I would consider that a feather in his cap for sure. Jose Aldo ain't knocking anybody out these days. Davey Grant ain't knocking anyone out. That was like a 40-year-old Frankie Edgar. He's not going to knock anybody out. Pillow Hands Font. I mean, Adrian Yanez got knocked out by him, but he's not going to knock out Chito, right? Pillow Hands Cruz, is he knocking him out? What about Corey Sandhagen? When was the last time he knocked someone out? Obviously, it was that flying knee, but he never landed a flying knee on Chito. So, and then Pedro Munoz. I mean, who's this guy fighting that has the power in his hands that Suga does? Like, somebody tell me where in this record was there somebody, only one, the most recent one would be Song Yadong, who can thump. But Song Yadong doesn't have the accuracy that Suga does. He doesn't have the footwork that Suga does. He doesn't have the range management that Suga does. Sugar Sean O'Malley will knock out Chito Vera. He is going to starch him out cold in Florida. He's going to be waking up and asking his coach what hit him. And what's going to have hit him is him having to overextend in round 3 or 4. He's down bad on the scorecards. Maybe he's down 2-1. Maybe he's down 2-0. And he tries to overextend. Suga's able to move out of the way of the strike, pull away from it the same way that he did against Aljo. It might even come off the back of a body teep the same way that it did against Aljo, but he's going to land a clean check hook. He's going to sit Chito down on his ass, and he's not going to knock him out cold, but he's going to be hurt really bad, and the champ's not going to give him time to recover. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Let me know which fight you're most excited to watch in the comments below. If you agree with my picks, let me know which picks you think are going to hit. If you disagree with my picks, go ahead and let me know why, unless it's on that Benoit fight, because then you're just wrong. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.